Step out of the vehicle right now. What for? I didn't do anything. Step out now. I'm not stepping out. You don't have a reason. There's a pause. The trooper doesn't argue. He doesn't raise his voice. He simply opens the door, takes control of the situation in seconds, and the entire tone of the encounter shifts. And that moment, right there, is what raises the question. Was this a professional officer dealing with a non-compliant driver, or did this escalate faster than it needed to? Because once you look past the attitude, past the tone, and past the personalities, what you're really left with is a legal question. How much authority does an officer actually have during a traffic stop, and what happens when someone refuses to comply? Let's break it down. If knowing your rights matters to you, subscribe now. Share this with someone who needs it, and drop your opinion below. The man at the center of this encounter appears to be an adult male, driving alone on a highway in Arkansas. No indication he's a hardened criminal, no indication of a serious crime in progress, just a routine traffic stop, at least at the start. From what can be gathered, the initial reason for the stop was likely a traffic violation, something minor, speeding, lane usage, maybe equipment related, the kind of stop that happens thousands of times every day. To him, this probably felt like an inconvenience, maybe even unnecessary. To the trooper, it was another routine enforcement stop. Approach the vehicle, identify the driver, address the violation. Two completely different mindsets walking into the same moment. And that's where things begin to drift. The trooper approaches the vehicle. Calm, direct. "Good evening, Arkansas State Police. The reason I stopped you..." But before the explanation can even fully land, the tone changes. "What did I do?" It's not just the question, it's the way it's asked. Defensive, sharp, already challenging the authority of the stop. The trooper continues. "I'll explain everything. I need your license first." And here's where we see the first turning point. Instead of complying immediately, the driver leans back slightly, posture stiffening. "Why do you need that if you haven't told me what I did?" Now, this is important. At this stage, the officer is still within a very standard part of the stop. Asking for identification is routine, it's expected, and in many jurisdictions, drivers are required to provide it during a lawful traffic stop. But the driver is not there yet mentally. He's focused on challenging the premise before complying. The trooper pauses. "I will explain everything. I need your license first." Another chance to reset. Another opportunity to de-escalate. But instead, the driver doubles down. "I'm not giving you anything until you tell me why I'm stopped." Now the air shifts, because what could have been a simple exchange is now a refusal. And refusals during traffic stops carry legal consequences. The trooper's tone tightens but stays controlled. "Sir, you're required to provide your license during a traffic stop." "I don't care. You need to tell me first." And that's the moment the stop stops being routine. Let's pause here, because the legal issue at this point is actually pretty clear, at least in general terms. When an officer initiates a lawful traffic stop, they have the authority to request identification from the driver. In many states, including places like Arkansas, a driver is expected to provide a valid driver's license when requested. Now, does the officer have to explain the reason for the stop? Yes, generally they should, but not necessarily before requesting identification. Courts often view the ID request as part of the initial control and safety phase of the stop. So the order of events, license first, explanation second, is not unusual. And this is where people get into trouble, because from the driver's perspective, it feels like a fairness issue. Tell me what I did, then I'll cooperate. But from a legal standpoint, that's not how it works. Refusing to provide ID during a lawful stop can quickly escalate into additional charges, like obstruction or failure to comply. So at this point, the trooper likely has legal grounds to escalate, but still has discretion in how to handle it. And this is where officer judgment becomes critical. Back to the scene. The trooper doesn't keep debating, he shifts tactics. "Step out of the vehicle." That command changes everything, because now we're no longer talking about a simple document request. We're talking about physical control of the situation. The reaction is immediate, but brief. "What are you doing? I didn't..." "Stop resisting." Within seconds, the driver is out, turned, and placed in handcuffs. And just like that, the entire encounter is transformed. What started as a traffic stop is now a custodial detention. Now we need to look at the second layer of legal issues, because this is where things get more complex. First, the order to exit the vehicle, generally lawful. Second, the refusal, can be interpreted as non-compliance. Third, the physical removal. This is where use of force standards come into play. Officers are typically allowed to use reasonable force to carry out lawful commands. The key word there is reasonable. So the question becomes, was the force proportional to the resistance? In this case, the trooper appears to have used minimal, direct force to remove the driver after clear verbal commands were ignored. No strikes, no prolonged struggle, no escalation beyond what was needed to gain control. From a legal standpoint, many would argue this falls within acceptable use of force guidelines. But that doesn't end the conversation, because just because something is legally justified doesn't automatically mean it was the best possible outcome in that moment. And this is where policy, training, and discretion become focus. Could the situation have been de-escalated earlier? Possibly. Could the officer have explained the reason for the stop sooner to reduce tension? Maybe. Could the driver have avoided the entire escalation by simply complying first and challenging later? Absolutely. After the arrest, the consequences begin to stack. The driver is now facing potential charges beyond the original traffic violation: failure to comply, obstruction, possibly resisting, depending on how the interaction is interpreted. And this is something people often underestimate. One moment of defiance during a stop can multiply legal exposure very quickly. As for the aftermath, cases like this often follow a familiar pattern. The footage gets reviewed, supervisors look at whether the officer followed department policy, the driver may file a complaint or even pursue legal action arguing the stop was mishandled or escalated unnecessarily. Sometimes charges are reduced or dropped, sometimes they stick. Without full access to court records, we can't say exactly how this specific case concluded, but we can analyze what we do know. Now comes the accountability question. Was the trooper legally justified? In many respects, yes. The officer appears lawful. The request for identification was standard. The command to exit the vehicle falls within established authority. And the use of force, based on what's visible, appears controlled and limited. But here's the critical distinction. Did the officer have legal authority? Maybe. But having authority doesn't automatically mean the decision was the best one available in that moment. Because policing is not just about what you can do, it's about what you should do. And this is where reasonable people can disagree. Some will say the trooper handled it exactly right, firm, professional, and efficient in dealing with non-compliance. Others will argue that a few more seconds of explanation could have prevented the entire escalation. Both perspectives can exist at the same time. Now, looking at the driver, he made a critical mistake early on. He chose to challenge before complying, and while that may feel justified emotionally, it often backfires legally, because the roadside is not where disputes get resolved, it's where they begin. The safest move in most situations is simple. Comply with lawful commands, provide identification, stay calm, and if you believe your rights were violated, you challenge that later through proper legal channels. Not in the moment, because once the situation turns physical, you've lost control of the outcome. And that's the real lesson here. Not about winning an argument, not about proving a point, but about understanding how quickly a routine stop can escalate when both sides stop listening. So the takeaway is clear. Stay calm. Comply with lawful orders. Do not argue on the roadside. Document everything if you can. Ask if you are free to leave, and if things go further, ask for a lawyer and handle it in court, because the street is not the place to test legal boundaries. That's what the courtroom is for. Now, the question is yours. Do you think this was lawful police work, or did this officer take a routine situation way too far?